Ready for the video?
I am.
Let's do it.
All right, let's go. Sexuality, but we also should promote it. And that kind of like left a sour taste in my mouth because
Present practice. What's conscious? This is Vish and
Ilisa,
and today we'll be reacting to.
Sadhguru's views on sexual preference.
Want to tell the audience more about yourself, Ilisa?
Yeah, so I'm a student in Austin, and then I do some creative things on social media.
And I'm an aspiring yogi, so on this spiritual journey, and grateful for Ilisa to be here. And let's get into the video.
Let's go.
Sweet.
So I'm pretty sure everyone knows about Section 377 being decriminalized. Yeah. And I think most of the youth would have gone back home. We're very happy about this. And we talk to our parents and people from the older generation, right? So when we discuss something like this with our older generation, they said, we are not going to debate with you as such. We're not going to impose our perspectives on you. But this is not accepted in our religion. So just want to know your perspective on, the LGBT community or homosexuality as such with religion.
Let's see, probably till now, largely in the social space, in the media space, in the social media space, everybody is pitching either for or against. Can we for some time not pitch for or against and simply look at the issue as it is? Can we? Look at me, I'm not a prude, okay? Let that be clear. So, when we say sexuality, let's understand this. It is something nature has put in us because there is something called as perpetuation of the race or the species, otherwise it won't happen. Of course, we being human beings, having more brains than body, supposed to, because of that, we kind of eliminated the reproductive part and just using the pleasure part of it, all right? This is sexuality right now largely in the world. But essentially, this pleasure also is come into the sexuality process because otherwise, well, if there was no pleasure to it, maybe we wouldn't be born, you and me. Our parents would not have gone into it if there was no pleasure at all attached. Yes or no? So we are here because of that. So there is no denying it or putting it under the carpet, that's not the thing. But somebody has a certain kind of sexual preference which has got nothing to do with reproductive process as such. It is their personal preference because every individual has the right to do whatever the hell they want to do with their body because it's their body. But if it is something harmful, you're going to cut your nose off or you're going to cut something else off, then maybe we will try to prevent you. But you're not causing any harm to yourself in that way, then it's your business as long as you do something in your private. Right now, the Supreme Court decision is just that what a person does in their private space is nobody's business. Government need not enter people's bedrooms, that is the law, all right? Now, coming to this religious resistance, there's nothing religious about this. We don't have to discriminate against them, we don't have to persecute them, we don't have to put them in the prison, definitely it's not necessary. But at the same time, it doesn't need promotion either. So, you don't have to… when your parents say something, they may refer to their religion because they think it's an authority. You take away the authority, just listen to the words. If it makes sense, do it. If it doesn't make sense, tell them politely, that's not the way it is with me, all right?
So this is an interesting one. What do you think?
Definitely an interesting one. I feel like the first half there wasn't a whole lot of saying anything, kind of just equating sexuality to the need for reproduction, which a lot of people do. And then I kind of hung up on the word promote.
Okay. Tell me, what do you mean by that, yeah?
So he said, like, we shouldn't suppress sexuality, but we also shouldn't promote it. And that kind of like left a sour taste in my mouth because like we've kind of talked about identity and things like that, but normally people like I feel like what he's saying by promote is like being more outward about it and advocating for it, because he said let's not talk about for or against, but like being for like the ability to be open, to come out, to have your sexuality be able to be expressed as part of yourself. Like I think that's very important, and especially after being in a culture where it's not allowed, I think there needs to be a time of like recovery where it is promoted so that it becomes accepted, and then it doesn't have to be a thing like so talked about or things like that, because everyone is like, yeah, this is obviously fine.
That's an interesting perspective. So yeah, no, I think that makes sense. So essentially, I definitely vibe with the recovery period that you'd mentioned, right? So when a society, especially, I think maybe what might be a slightly differing context to this is that he's coming from the Indian background of people in India, and I guess how people are treated there is a little different than in America. And at least to my knowledge, I don't know too much about this, but in fact, it's interesting. In I think they call it let's call it the ancient Indian culture, sexuality was actually pretty, okay, to a certain extent promoted, but it was promoted to the point meaning it was accepted, right? So it wasn't a stigma where parents wouldn't talk to their kids about it, because it's actually now, especially in Asian households, it's not talked about at all, right? So it's kind of shunned, just even talking about that in the first place. So there was a period of time where it was actually pretty open, and even from what I recall, and I could be wrong here, so don't come at me, but just sharing what I know. And with the Gita, or I think some ancient Indian books, they talk about how people were of different sexual orientation. It was a completely normal and natural thing, meaning, as our discussion prior, it wasn't like a prideful thing, right? It was just do what you want, do it in your bedroom, and that's fine. I mean, it's nothing that needs to be like yelled at or like be your identity. So maybe he's coming from that lens, and maybe in the U.S., because of how much it's been put down, and because of how, I guess to a certain extent persecuted people were of that community, I can see that need for, to a certain extent, promotion. What do you think about what I've just shared?
Yeah, I think that obviously there's cultural context to take into consideration with both like reactions, and like in India, like gay rights became like later than it did in the US, although not like it was super soon in the US, but like with like the AIDS epidemic and how like homosexuals, especially homosexual men, were treated, it was like there's very much a like idea against homosexuality, and there's a strong like especially like Christian religious position against it, that it's like a sin. So there's a strong sense against it, and I feel like the US has never even had like super open and accepting of like heterosexuality, and in a sense of like how like slut shaming and all of that is still like a very strong thing. I don't think, like you said, like talking to your kids about sex and things like that like was a common practice, and like in the US it's still kind of like not so much in that way, or just like there's this whole like sexual revolution that's separate from gay rights and everything, but like just a general of like sexuality is something, even like the idea of like, oh, it's in the bedroom, so whatever you do is fine, that's still like it's something private, so people don't really talk about it, and almost like when you don't talk to your kids about it, it kind of implies it's not something that should be talked about at all, which kind of sends the wrong message.
That's interesting. Again, I'm trying to, I guess, just like process and reflect on what you've just shared as well. And I appreciate it. And that's something I wanted to make clear as well with this channel and viewers in general. I truly value open discussion. Whether I agree with you or disagree with you, it doesn't matter, right? I think that's not even the point. The point is to encourage open discussion, and that in turn would help people see the different sides, right, to whatever topic is being discussed. So that's, I don't know, I'll be honest, that's where I'm a bit on the fence. I'm not saying, again, I'm by no means against any of these things, but it just goes back to my, like, the spiritual viewpoint on life itself, right, which is to, like, not just promote this per se, but it's like the idea of you don't want to promote anything, right, whether it's your nationality even, or whether it's your race even, although I could see why, again, this is where your input was really valuable, how there might be some periods of times where it might be needed, right? Especially when it's been put down so much. Yeah, what do you think about what I've just said?
Yeah, I feel like we need him to elaborate more on what he meant by promote, because like how you just said promote seemed more of like pushing onto others, like especially with like nationality or race or things like that. That can be very much, I'm better than you and this and that, which is a different kind of promote than being like, we should all love who we want. Like those are, it's just different. So I think like having him expand on that, I feel like he kind of avoided answering the question, which is why I think I promoted it in the way I did. So
okay, no, that's a great perspective, and it is a 5-minute video, right? So I'm sure it's just a snippet of what he was saying. But no, that was great. I appreciate you sharing. Would you want to share to the viewers like your experiences with sexual orientation?
Yeah, for sure. So like part of my perspective on this is because I'm bi, and so that like colors a lot of this, because I've had people, you know, not react positively to it and had to kind of like fight for like being able to like exist this way or things like that. And so like coming from a point of understanding like people not accepting it and being against promoting or even just existing like that, like I've heard a lot of the criticism and know why so many people are against it. So like that's why my reaction is like, no, like we need to talk about it, like it needs to be accepted and like promoted to an extent so that like other kids, like future generations, don't have the difficulties coming out that I did.
That's a great point. Now I'm actually curious because I think you raised some interesting points here, and this is where I think it can be a bit gray, right? So when you say it shouldn't be, or it should be promoted to an extent, what do you mean by that? Like what extent? Just yeah.
So by that I think I mean like it should be open and talked about. Like right now, like there should be people who like represent our community and are really like pushing the label. Because if you keep the mentality of, yeah, it's fine, but I don't want to hear about it, it's still like, there's still going to be some kind of shame associated with it. So if we have people like advocating for it, like even a controversial one is like having representation in children's books and things like that, so that it's shown that it like is a normal thing and like this is how people are, like this is a part of diversity, and having that kind of inclusion like by pushing for it. And I think like promote right now is seen as pushing because there's such a strong reaction against it. So like my parents would have a very strong reaction to me saying that children's books should have like 2 moms in a story, like not it be the story necessarily, but just be part of the story, like shows that it's just a part of life. So like that's what I'm kind of meaning by like we should promote and push the label and like just have society accept it, because not a lot of the society does.
That's a great perspective. I appreciate you sharing that as well, because I think it's, I guess, and that's why these questions are helping me, it's making me realize how very much in line with what you're saying. I would say, and this is like the view that I have, at least coming from the spiritual background, all these years of meditation, not saying I'm enlightened or I'm not saying I'm the wise one, just sharing what I've learned, right? I definitely would be for that, in the sense that like if there are books or even movies or like shows that have people of different, I mean, it's literally a natural part of society. We can't ignore it. I think that's perfectly fine. I think totally okay. Where I don't know, I think it goes back to what promotion means, right? I think, and so that form of promotion, I think I'm completely fine. And when people are, if there are cases where people are against that, they're like, oh no, we want to see standard mom, dad. That, I don't know if that's fair, because that's their attachment, right? To this is how it should be. But no, I think sprinkling that in, or just literally, I mean, it goes back to even demographics, right? I think the racial diversity is a lot different now than it was 100 years ago, and so I think it's definitely fair and probably definitely quite reasonable to have TV shows or whatever books represent that diversity, and same thing applies to orientation. I just don't know, again, going back to what I was sharing before, whether it's again politics, whether it's like having like this banner and like having like a whole, like as an example, and this is not me for or against, I'm not going to share what my views are per se, but like just a great example, Trump, right, and his whole MAGA type of thing with like hats and flags and all these things. Again, regardless of what your views are about him or his party or whatever, I don't care. To me, that's a bit high promotion, right? Like in your face type of stuff. hopefully, am I making sense in terms of like
Yeah.
what? Yeah, we'd love to get your views on what I'm saying.
Yeah, like with the Trump thing, it's to the point where like you don't know what they believe at all because all they're saying is like Trump, 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 which like don't even know what Trump stands for necessarily. So like that's not like a conversation of ideas or perspectives or anything. It's really just like setting you up for antagonism and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah. What do you think about the promotion though viewpoint that I have? I mean, would love to hear honest, transparent.
Yeah, I think it kind of relates to William Cross's racial identity model. So like his idea is that like you start off without like accepting who you are racially, and then like there's a period where like you're confronted with it and you have to like be like, oh, I am like a minority in like white America. Like it was specifically like came out of the 60s and 70s and stuff. And then you kind of like dive into your culture and really start identifying with it, but also usually comes with like an anti-white sentiment. But then like as you keep going, then like you accept your racial identity, take like what you want to identify with it and like have it as part of your life. But then also like you start to see like the commonalities in oppression of other minorities and other like groups in the US who might have like similar stories of oppression and kind of like working together towards betterment. So it's like that kind of like process of like figuring out you might be queer, and then like kind of like having this anger and frustration about how like queer people in the US have like experienced such hardship, and then like maybe even develops towards like, well, I don't even like straight people or like whatever, but then like you get past it and realize like, okay, like this can be a part of me, and then I can use like my struggle with this to help other people who are struggling and things like that, to find like a commonality and a greater good while still accepting yourself, but not being so just like hateful to where you're like damaging your own mental health and stopping like progress.
Thank you again for sharing that perspective. Really insightful. And yeah, I think it comes down to, let me ask you this. As you do identify, right, being a part of the community, what would you say the major goal is? Is it acceptance by society, or what would you describe it as?
I don't know. I feel like it definitely differ on who you ask, but I think some people definitely argue that like acceptance is kind of like the bare minimum of kind of what like we've been fighting for a while. Well, okay, no, I think it was like people were fighting for tolerance, which is very different from acceptance. So like tolerating you is like, you know, I'm not gonna hate crime you for this, versus like accepting is like it's a part of you, cool, move on, like live your life that way, love that. But there's
normalized.
Yeah, exactly, normalized. Yeah.
So would you say that's like the overall goal for like the movement?
Yeah, I think that'd be like a good goal.
Okay. Makes sense. And so I guess, you know, I don't have an answer here, and I'm not sure if you have an answer, but I think the key here is to, if the goal is to normalize and bring about full acceptance, which I would say I fully agree with, like it definitely needs to be the case. I think what might be important is the way that maybe that's done, right? Because I don't know if fighting fire with fire is always the way to go, right? And yes, there's always going to be these people that are hateful, and that's just how they are. But it's kind of just like an endless cycle, right, at that point. And yeah, again, I don't know what the answer is, but what do you think about that statement?
Yeah, I feel like there's always discourse about like methods. Like for example, like there's the idea like you can't, you know, take back rights from your oppressor if they're like using violence, like they're not going to listen to words, like that's like an argument. But also if you turn into the caricature of whatever like other people think of like that particular identity, then they're really not going to listen to you. So it's like, I don't know, I kind of like bounce between different ideas of what I think is like the best method, but like it probably takes like a combination of different methods to really like make true progress.
Yeah, it goes back to, I guess, tying this actually to another video we just did together, which is why I brought this question up, is I think being focused on what is truly the goal, right? Because I think money, for instance, has become, I mean, it's quite necessary as we just discussed, but it's become almost a stamp of the label that we lose sight of what we're really striving for, right? And I think that's important to also just be aware of and conscious of, right? With anything, right? Any movement, any effort, to make sure we don't get lost in the sauce of the end goal, right? And enjoy the process.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I appreciate you for being so transparent, so kind, and just being part of this. Y'all don't forget to check her out. She makes some really cool content. All of her stuff will be down below. And want to give yourself a shout out?
yeah, you can follow me at Ilisa Lane on Instagram and TikTok. If you want to see some modeling stuff or some cool, like, funny creative stuff on TikTok, I would love to see you there.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, my stuff will also be down below. And with that, make a great day, take a joyful, and stay conscious. Great job.
Thank you.
You did awesome.
I tried.